Hey everyone. Before we dive in, I want to know, where are you all watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. Globe showing Europe, Africa. Let's see how far this community of truth seekers and story lovers stretches. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to Unheard Stories, where we uncover the most shocking tales of betrayal, heartbreak, and yes, revenge that will leave you speechless. Now let me ask you this, what would you do if the person you trusted most, the one you built your life with, betrayed you in the most unimaginable way? That's what today's story is about, and trust me, you won't want to miss a second of it. It all starts with a locked door on an ordinary evening. A husband comes home early, expecting the warmth of family, only to discover the chilling truth about his wife's betrayal. But this isn't just a story of infidelity, it's about the devastating fallout, the lengths a father will go to protect his children, and a revenge so calculated it left everyone stunned. Stay with me as we unravel how one man uncovered his wife's shocking double life, escaped with his kids, and exposed a web of lies so intricate it will leave you questioning everything. Grab your snacks, settle in, and prepare yourself. This is not just a story, it's a roller coaster you won't forget. Eric had always prided himself on being the reliable one. A mid-level project manager at a construction firm, he was the definition of a hard-working husband and father. His day started early, often with a quick breakfast prepared for his kids, Max and Lila, before he headed out the door. He loved his routine, finding comfort in the predictability of his life. For Eric, family was everything, his safe harbor in a chaotic world. He adored his wife, Jessica, and trusted her implicitly. Their 12-year marriage had been, in his eyes, built on mutual love and respect. Jessica had recently started working from home in marketing, a shift that gave her flexibility to manage family and pursue her ambitions. Eric supported her decision wholeheartedly, believing it was her way of staying engaged and fulfilled. But cracks started to form in the life Eric thought was rock solid. Jessica began acting distant, her warmth replaced by a cold detachment. Small things caught Eric's attention: a guarded phone, abrupt changes in her schedule, and a mysterious new perfume he hadn't bought for her. He tried to brush it off as stress from work, but deep down, a gnawing unease had taken root. The locked door incident would soon confirm his worst fears. Jessica was a woman of charm and ambition. She had always been the life of the party, effortlessly captivating those around her. Her sharp wit and magnetic personality had drawn Eric to her all those years ago. But the monotony of suburban life, managing the household and taking care of the kids, had started to wear on her. Jessica craved excitement, spontaneity, and the sense of being desired. The routine love of her husband, though steady and genuine, began to feel suffocating. That's when Ryan entered her life, a personal trainer at the local gym where she had recently taken up fitness classes. Jessica found in Ryan what she thought was missing: flirtation, thrill, and the illusion of freedom. She rationalized her actions, convincing herself that Eric's long work hours and predictable demeanor were to blame. As her affair deepened, Jessica became more secretive, mastering the art of deception. She felt no guilt, only annoyance when her web of lies began to unravel. Ryan Carter was the embodiment of temptation for someone like Jessica. A personal trainer with a sculpted physique and a smooth tongue, Ryan exuded confidence. He thrived on attention and knew how to play his cards to get it. Beneath the charm, though, Ryan's life was far from perfect. He lived paycheck to paycheck, struggling to manage mounting debt from bad financial decisions. His social media profiles painted a picture of luxury and fitness retreats, but the reality was far less glamorous. For Ryan, women like Jessica were a game, an ego boost more than a meaningful connection. He knew how to say just the right things to make her feel alive and validated, even as he juggled relationships with several other women. Jessica, blinded by his attention, never questioned his motives. To her, Ryan represented the escape she longed for, not the chaos he would inevitably bring into her life. Max and Lila were the heart of Eric's world. Max, the older sibling at 9 years old, was observant and thoughtful, often acting as a little protector for his 6-year-old sister, Lila. Lila, on the other hand, was a bundle of energy and innocence, with a penchant for whimsical stories and a stuffed unicorn she refused to part with. Their days were filled with school, playdates, and weekend outings with Eric, who always made time for them despite his busy work schedule. Max loved puzzles and soccer, while Lila's world revolved around art and make-believe adventures. Eric worked hard to shield them from any tension, but as Jessica grew more distant, even Max started to notice. "Is Mommy mad at you?" he would ask, his innocent curiosity breaking Eric's heart. For Eric, the kids weren't just his responsibility, they were his reason to fight. He vowed to protect them from the storm brewing in their home, even if it meant making the hardest choices of his life. Eric wasn't supposed to be home that early. It was a Friday, and he had managed to finish work ahead of schedule, excited to surprise his kids with cupcakes he had picked up from their favorite bakery. He walked into the house expecting the usual sounds: Jessica on a phone call or tapping away at her laptop in the kitchen, the kids' laughter echoing from upstairs. But the house was eerily silent. Setting the cupcakes on the counter, he called out, "Jess? You here?" The silence that followed was heavy, almost unnatural. Something felt off. He climbed the stairs, his heart beginning to race as he noticed their bedroom door shut, a rarity in their 12 years of marriage. The door wasn't just shut. It was locked. Eric knocked, trying to sound casual. "Jessica? Everything okay in there?" There was a pause before Jessica's voice floated through, unusually high-pitched. "Yeah, just finishing something up. Be down in a minute." His stomach twisted. "What are you hiding in there? Christmas presents?" He joked, but his voice betrayed his unease. Jessica's laugh was strained. "Yeah, exactly. Just, don't come in, okay?" Before Eric could respond, he heard it, a faint rustle of fabric followed by hurried whispers. His heart sank. "Jess," he said, his voice now sharp, "who's in there with you?" There was no answer, only the sound of hurried movement. Eric's mind raced, each possibility worse than the last. When Jessica didn't respond, his patience snapped. "Open the door. Now." "No?" Jessica's voice was panicked. Without thinking, Eric threw his weight against the door, slamming his shoulder into it. On the second attempt, the lock gave way and the door burst open. The scene froze him in place. Jessica stood near the bed, her face pale, clutching the edge of the mattress. Beside her, partially hidden by the closet door, was a man in his mid-30s, half-dressed, scrambling to pull on his jeans. "What the hell is this?" Eric managed to choke out, his voice shaking. Jessica didn't look guilty or apologetic. Instead, she seemed annoyed, as though Eric's presence was the inconvenience. "You weren't supposed to be home yet," she muttered, her tone cold and detached. That sentence hit Eric harder than anything else. Not an explanation, not an apology, just cold indifference. The man stammered, Look, I should probably go." "You think?" Eric snapped, stepping toward him. The man flinched, grabbed his clothes and bolted past Eric, leaving the room in seconds. Now it was just Eric and Jessica, standing in the wreckage of their marriage. Eric stared at Jessica, his chest heaving with anger and heartbreak. "How long?" he demanded, his voice trembling. Jessica crossed her arms and looked away. "Does it matter?" Her indifference was a slap in the face. "Does it matter?" he echoed, incredulous. "We have a family, Jess. 2 kids. And this is what you do while I'm working to keep us afloat?" Jessica rolled her eyes, her tone dripping with disdain. "Oh, don't give me that family crap. You're never around, Eric. You work late, you barely talk to me, and honestly, you're boring." The word boring was like a dagger to his chest. He had worked tirelessly to provide for them, sacrificing his own time and needs to ensure they had a comfortable life. And this was her justification? "Boring?" he spat. "That's your excuse for destroying everything? For bringing another man into our home?" Jessica didn't flinch. "I needed more, Eric. You stopped trying a long time ago. So don't act like this is all my fault." Eric stood there, staring at the woman he thought he knew, realizing she was a stranger. His anger burned, but beneath it was a profound sadness. He didn't say another word. Instead, he turned and walked out of the room. He went straight to Max and Lila's bedrooms and knelt beside them. "Pack a bag," he said softly. "We're going on an adventure." The kids, too young to understand the gravity of the situation, were excited. Jessica didn't follow him downstairs. She didn't call out or try to stop him. She let them leave without a word. By the time Jessica returned home later that evening, happy from her little escapade, the house was empty. Eric and the kids were gone. The drive to the motel was quiet, the weight of Eric's decision pressing on him like a vice. Max and Lila chattered in the back seat, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in their father's chest. Every mile he put between them and that house felt like another piece of his old life breaking away. "Daddy, where's Mommy?" Lila asked, clutching her favorite stuffed unicorn. Eric swallowed the lump in his throat. "Mommy had to stay home, sweetie. This is just a special trip for us." Max, always the more observant one, narrowed his eyes. "Did you and Mommy have a fight?" Eric forced a smile in the rearview mirror. "No, buddy. Everything's fine. Just sit back and enjoy the ride." When they reached the motel, Max wrinkled his nose at the sight of the rundown exterior. "This doesn't look like a fun trip," he muttered. Eric didn't respond. He checked them into a room with 2 small beds and tried to create a sense of normalcy for the kids, ordering pizza and setting up a video game console on the old TV. But while the kids laughed and played, Eric sat on the other bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper and trying to make sense of what had happened. His phone buzzed. Jessica. He didn't answer. Her messages started flooding in. "Where are you? This isn't funny, Eric. Bring the kids home. We need to talk." Eric ignored them all. It wasn't until her tone turned angry that he finally replied. "The kids are safe. I'll call you when I'm ready." Jessica's response came quickly. "You're overreacting. Don't do something you'll regret." Eric scoffed, shaking his head. He regretted plenty, trusting her, ignoring the signs, believing in a woman who clearly didn't believe in him. Believing? Taking the kids? That was a choice he'd never regret. That night, as his children slept soundly beside him, Eric stared at the ceiling and made a promise to himself. Jessica would never hurt them again. She thought she had control, but she had underestimated him. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. Eric drove for hours, the kids fast asleep in the back seat, their small faces illuminated by the occasional streetlights. His destination was a remote cabin he'd rented on the edge of a peaceful lake. It wasn't much, but it was far from the life he was leaving behind. A place where he could breathe, think, and protect his children. When they arrived, the cabin smelled of cedar and the faint dampness of the lake air. Max and Lila woke up groggily, their sleepy eyes lighting up at the sight of the lake shimmering in the moonlight. "Are we going to live here now, Daddy?" Lila asked, clutching her stuffed unicorn. "Just for a little while, sweetie," Eric replied, brushing her hair out of her face. Over the next few days, Eric tried to create a sense of normalcy for the kids. They explored the woods, skipped stones on the lake, and played games by the fireplace. Lila delighted in catching fireflies, while Max tried to build a fortress out of sticks. But when the kids were asleep, Eric was consumed by his thoughts. The betrayal, Jessica's indifference, and Ryan's smug face haunted him. He knew he couldn't let Jessica's choices destroy their lives. He needed a plan, not just to protect his kids but to reclaim control of his shattered world. Eric started with Jessica's email. Years ago, he had helped her set up the account, unknowingly linking it to an old backup email of his. Logging in was easy, and what he found turned his stomach. There were flirty messages exchanged between Jessica and Ryan, plans for clandestine meetups, and even reservations for a hotel she had claimed was for a networking event. Each email painted a picture of a double life Eric hadn't seen coming. Worse, there were photos, intimate snapshots Jessica had shared with Ryan, as well as forwarded pictures of Max and Lila. Seeing his children dragged into her deceit filled Eric with a rage he hadn't known he was capable of. But Eric knew he couldn't act on emotion alone. He needed more. That's when he reached out to Greg, a co-worker with connections to a private investigator. Enter Mike, a gruff, no-nonsense investigator who promised results. Within days, Mike delivered a report that was as damning as it was thorough. Ryan Carter wasn't just a charming personal trainer, he was a financial disaster. Maxed out credit cards, unpaid loans, and a pending eviction revealed a man drowning in debt. Ryan also had a criminal record, 2 arrests for drunk and disorderly conduct. But the real kicker? Ryan wasn't exclusive to Jessica. Mike uncovered at least 3 other women Ryan was seeing, all of whom seemed oblivious to one another. Surveillance photos showed Ryan cozying up to another woman at a bar just days after Eric had walked out on Jessica. Eric stared at the report, his anger sharpening into a deadly resolve. Jessica had gambled their family on a man who was nothing but a ticking time bomb. Now it was time to use the truth against her. Eric's first move was subtle. He needed to plant seeds of doubt in Ryan and Jessica's perfect little world. It started with a confrontation. One Saturday night, Eric tracked Ryan to his favorite bar, a crowded dive with cheap drinks and loud music. Eric sat at a corner table, nursing a beer and watching as Ryan laughed with his friends. Eventually, Ryan approached the bar alone, giving Eric his opening. "Ryan Carter?" Eric said, stepping up beside him. Ryan turned, startled. "Yeah. Who's asking?" Eric's voice was calm but icy. "Eric. Jessica's husband." Ryan's face paled. He opened his mouth to respond, but Eric cut him off. "Relax," Eric said, holding up his hands. "I'm not here to fight. I just wanted to meet the guy who's been sneaking around with my wife." Ryan swallowed hard, glancing around nervously. "Look, man, I didn't." "Save it," Eric interrupted. "I already know everything. The emails, the meetups, the hotel reservations. But I just have one question." Ryan hesitated. What? Eric leaned in, his voice low and pointed. Does she know about the others? Ryan stiffened. What others? Eric smirked. Come on, Ryan. You think I didn't find out? The girl at the bar last week? The one before that? How do you think Jessica's going to feel when she finds out she's not the only one? Ryan's confidence crumbled. His eyes darted toward his friends, who were still oblivious to the conversation. Eric stepped back, his smirk widening. Enjoy your night, Ryan. And don't worry, I'll make sure Jessica gets the full story. He walked away, leaving Ryan visibly shaken. Step 1, plant doubt. Next came the public posts. Eric knew Jessica valued her carefully curated image as a perfect wife and mother. It was time to crack that facade. He went through old photos of their family, finding one from a beach vacation a few years back. In it, Jessica was smiling, her arm draped around Eric. It looked picture perfect, but now Eric knew it was a lie. He posted the photo with a caption. Funny how a photo can lie. Behind the smiles are years of deceit. But don't worry, the truth always comes out. Within hours, the comments flooded in. Friends, coworkers, and even some of Jessica's family chimed in, shocked and supportive. Jessica's carefully built image was beginning to unravel. Eric didn't respond to the comments. That wasn't the point. The post wasn't about sharing his pain, it was about setting the stage for what was to come. Jessica was quick to notice the cracks. Her messages became increasingly frantic. What are you trying to do, Eric? Take that post down now. You're being ridiculous. Eric ignored her. Every step of his plan was calculated, and Jessica's unraveling was exactly what he needed to regain control. The revenge wasn't about yelling or breaking things. It was about precision, exposing the lies, dismantling Jessica's fantasy world, and showing her exactly what she had lost. As Eric sat by the lake that evening watching his kids chase fireflies, he felt a sense of clarity. Jessica had underestimated him, but she wouldn't make that mistake again. The game wasn't over, but the tide was turning, and Eric was no longer playing by her rules. Eric sat in the sleek, minimalist office of his lawyer, Dan Roberts. A no-nonsense man with a receding hairline and piercing blue eyes, Dan was known for his ability to dismantle even the most intricate lies. As Eric laid out his case, Dan nodded, his expression serious but calm. So, let me get this straight, Dan began. Your wife has been unfaithful, bringing her lover into your home, and now she's spinning a story to make you look like the bad guy? Eric nodded. She's trying to paint me as unstable. But I have everything: texts, emails, a report from a private investigator. Her lover has a criminal record, mounting debts and multiple girlfriends. She put our kids at risk? Dan's lips curved into a cold smile. We've got her. The courts care about facts, not sob stories. The key is to stay calm. Let her unravel herself. Eric left the meeting feeling a cautious sense of hope. For the first time, he felt like he had a fighting chance to protect his kids and regain control of his life. The courtroom was small but intimidating, with its polished wooden benches and a judge who radiated authority. Jessica sat across from Eric, her tailored blazer and carefully styled hair attempting to project an image of composure. She looked every bit the wronged mother, but Eric could see through the facade. Her lawyer began with a sharp narrative, painting Jessica as a loving, dedicated mother blindsided by Eric's erratic and controlling behavior. My client has always put her children first, the lawyer claimed. Eric's decision to take them away without notice is not only irresponsible but deeply damaging. Eric clenched his fists under the table but remained silent. Dan had prepared him for this moment. When it was Dan's turn, he stood confidently, a stack of evidence in his hands. Your Honor, what we have here is not a story of a devoted mother wronged by her husband. It is a case of betrayal, neglect, and poor judgment that put two innocent children at risk. Dan began presenting the evidence methodically, starting with Jessica's text messages and emails. The room fell silent as messages between Jessica and Ryan were projected onto a screen, flirty exchanges, explicit details about their meetups, and even references to hotel stays. Jessica's lawyer attempted to object, but the judge overruled her. The texts are clear evidence of Mrs. Green's infidelity and poor decision-making, Dan continued. But that's not all. Next came the private investigator's report. Dan detailed Ryan's financial troubles, criminal record, and the multiple relationships he had been juggling, all supported by photos and documents. This is the man Mrs. Green brought into her children's lives, Dan stated, his voice sharp. Jessica squirmed in her seat, her previously calm demeanor beginning to crack. The final blow came when two witnesses took the stand. mutual friends who testified to Jessica's frequent absences and distracted behavior over the past several months. One friend even described seeing Jessica and Ryan holding hands in a parking lot while her children waited in the car. By the time Dan finished, Jessica's lawyer looked visibly shaken. The evidence was overwhelming, and it was clear to everyone in the room that the narrative Jessica had tried to spin was falling apart. When Jessica finally took the stand, she seemed more nervous than Eric had ever seen her. She tried to defend herself, claiming the messages with Ryan weren't misunderstood and that Eric was twisting the truth. "I'm not perfect," she said, her voice trembling. "But I've always done what's best for my children." Dan didn't let her off easy. "Mrs. Green, can you explain why hotel reservations for you and Mr. Carter are listed under your name? Is this another misunderstanding?" Jessica stammered, unable to provide a convincing answer. Dan pressed further, asking about Ryan's criminal record and his relationships with other women. "Were you aware of Mr. Carter's behavior, or did you not think to consider the safety of your children?" Jessica's composure shattered. "I made mistakes, okay?" she snapped. "But Eric isn't perfect either." "Perhaps not," Dan replied calmly. "But he didn't bring a man with a criminal record into his children's lives." By the end of the hearing, Jessica's once polished image was in tatters. The judge didn't deliberate for long. Her ruling was firm. Eric would have primary custody of Max and Lila, with Jessica receiving supervised visitation until she could prove she was stable and capable of making sound decisions for her children. Jessica sat frozen, disbelief etched across her face. As the judge adjourned the session, Jessica stormed out of the courtroom, slamming the door behind her. Later that evening, Eric sat on the porch of the cabin watching Max and Lila chase fireflies in the yard. Their laughter filled the air, a stark contrast to the tension that had consumed him for weeks. For the first time in what felt like forever, Eric felt a sense of peace. Jessica's lies and manipulation had crumbled under the weight of the truth. While the fight wasn't completely over, there was still the divorce to finalize. Eric had won the battle that mattered most. His children were safe and he had reclaimed control of his life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Eric made a silent promise to himself and his kids. They would rebuild. Together. Stronger than before. The war was over, and for the first time in a long time, Eric felt like he was truly free. The cabin felt quieter than usual that night, the stillness wrapping itself around Eric like a heavy blanket. The kids were asleep, their laughter and playful chatter replaced by the soft hum of crickets outside. Eric sat by the window looking out at the moonlit lake, his mind a whirlpool of thoughts. Jessica's betrayal had shaken him to his core. 4 years he had believed in their life together, pouring his energy into providing for the family and trusting that they were building something solid. Her affair hadn't just broken his heart, it had forced him to question everything he thought he knew about love, trust, and partnership. But it was Max and Lila who occupied most of his thoughts. He worried about the scars they might carry, the questions they might ask as they grew older. He wanted to shield them from the pain of what had happened, but he knew he couldn't erase it completely. All he could do was ensure that their future was filled with love, stability, and security. The sound of soft footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. Max stood in the doorway, his brow furrowed. "Can't sleep, buddy?" Eric asked gently. Max shook his head and climbed into Eric's lap, a rare gesture for his increasingly independent 9-year-old self. "Are we going to be okay, Dad?" Eric hugged him tightly, his throat tightening. "Yeah, Max, we're going to be okay. Better than okay. I promise." The next morning, Eric decided it was time to have an honest conversation with his kids about their new life. They sat on the porch, the lake glimmering in the distance, and Eric spoke carefully, choosing his words with the same precision he'd used in the courtroom. "Max, Lila," he began, his tone soft but steady, "I know things have been different lately. I know you've probably had a lot of questions." Lila clutched her stuffed unicorn tightly, her big eyes focused on Eric. Max, sitting cross-legged beside her, nodded solemnly. "Mommy and I love you both very much," Eric continued. "That will never change. But sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Big mistakes. And when that happens, it can change things for everyone. Is that why we're staying here?" Max asked, his voice small but curious. Eric nodded. "Yes. Mommy and I aren't going to live together anymore, but that doesn't mean we don't both care about you. It just means we're going to have a different kind of family now." Lila sniffled, her lip trembling. "But we'll still see Mommy, right?" "You will," Eric assured her. "It might not be as often, but you'll still see her. And no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you. You two are the most important things in my life." Max looked up at Eric, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and something else, trust. We're going to be okay, aren't we? Eric smiled, brushing a hand through Max's hair. We already are. Over the next few weeks, life began to take on a new rhythm. The cabin, which had initially been a temporary refuge, started to feel like home. Eric spent his mornings cooking pancakes for the kids, their laughter filling the small kitchen. Afternoons were spent fishing by the lake or hiking through the woods, and in the evenings they would sit by the fire reading stories or playing board games. Eric worked remotely during the day, finding balance in a way he hadn't been able to before. The stress that had once consumed him, endless deadlines, Jessica's increasing distance, had been replaced by a sense of purpose. His focus was entirely on his children and rebuilding their lives. There were challenges, of course. Jessica's supervised visits were awkward and tense, with moments of bitterness and forced smiles. But Eric remained cordial, refusing to let her manipulation creep back into his life. He had learned his lessons, about trust, about setting boundaries, and about the importance of prioritizing the people who truly mattered. Eric found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. Betrayal had shattered the life he thought he wanted, but it had also revealed a strength he hadn't known he possessed. He had learned that sometimes, the hardest trials could lead to the greatest growth. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Eric sat on the cabin porch with a cup of coffee. Max and Lila were in the yard, chasing fireflies under the soft glow of the moon. Their laughter carried through the crisp night air, and for the first time in months, Eric felt a profound sense of peace. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the smooth, round stone Lila had given him weeks earlier. She had called it a magic stone, one that could grant wishes. Holding it in his palm, Eric made his wish, not for revenge, not for answers, but for peace. For Max and Lila to grow up happy and safe. For the strength to keep moving forward, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Eric closed his eyes, exhaled deeply, and smiled. Betrayal might have shattered his world, but it had also given him the chance to rebuild something stronger. Something rooted in truth, love, and resilience. And as he watched his children twirl and laugh under the stars, he knew that their new beginning was just the start of a life worth fighting for. And that's where Eric's journey ends for now, a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and ultimately resilience. But what about you? What do you think about Eric's decisions? Could you have handled things differently? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Did Eric's revenge feel justified, or would you have taken a different approach? I'm excited to hear your take on this gripping story. And if this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Unheard Stories for more shocking, emotional, and unforgettable tales just like this one. Remember, life can throw us the most unexpected twists, but it's how we rise from the challenges that truly define us. Until next time, stay strong, stay curious, and keep coming back for more untold stories,